Hi. I keep forgetting, because I'm on OBS now, I keep forgetting to switch from one source to another. And so I'm like talking and I'm like vibing, and then I'm like, why is nothing happening? And I realized the error of my ways. Hello, how are you guys doing? It's another Wednesday, trying really hard to be disciplined. It's 7 p.m. on a Wednesday. We're doing this every week, and what we've been doing is a bunch of art for Final Fantasy VII. We're going through every single summon, and what we're going to be doing now is Leviathan, which is a really iconic, really well-loved summon, I think, across the entire Final Fantasy series. You tend to see it a lot. It's a water element. The Leviathan fight that you have when you get to Junon is the second time you encounter sort of what's known as like the triangle or bubble mechanic in the game, which is unique, and they were really experimenting with ways to, do cool stuff with characters. And so, yeah, I don't know. Leviathan is just like a really fun, interesting summon in my mind. So I'm just really looking forward to drawing him today. I guess that's all that there has to be said about it. So, yeah, I thought what we could start with is a video so that you guys have an idea of kind of who we're dealing with here. So we're going to swap out to this view. And so when you're playing Final Fantasy VII, make sure desktop audio is pretty high. When you're playing Final Fantasy VII, you have summons. You use the red materia for it. And so this is what it looks like. So he comes in from a bubble, and he gets really angry, and he tidal waves you. And that's the summon. I thought this would be a really fun summon to do as well, because there's a couple of things in here that I think technique-wise is going to be really fun to do. Let's turn off the music. So, bubbles right from the get-go. We don't really think about this a lot because many of us are consumers of this sort of content, but this bubble is the same asset that they just reused. And so it's interesting that even in like PlayStation 1 era graphics, they really made an effort to make things feel dynamic, even though they were using the same asset over and over again to save on file size. And then this texture that you see on these two balls is the same texture as the water that's going to come in on the tsunami. And the reason why you have this jump here from circles to a ball, I'm trying to step through the animation, sorry, it's making me double click, is because they're back, then this is still common, they're swapping out the model. And so that's why you don't see that sort of in-between of ball falling apart. It goes from the ball to a volume that's already shattered, and then they're transforming it to give you this feeling of the ball shattering, but it's actually just the way that they're doing texture mapping on these spheres that's going to give you that sensation, because that's the texture mapping manipulated. Some other really cool little design things in here, I think, is just the texture of water. I think it's going to be really fun to do. It's been trending a lot on TikTok as well, so we'll talk a little bit about that. And there's this really lovely effect that's going on here, and I don't quite know how they did it, but you see sort of that rim lighting. I don't quite know how they pulled that off, and I have a suspicion, because you can see little bits here and there. I think what they did is they had this volume of this water coming up, because again, we're talking about 1997 graphics here. I think, and this is speculation, they probably had another volume inside of it, and the texture mapping on that was probably just a white diffusion with a low opacity. And so you could see bits and pieces, again, it's my bias, but you could see bits and pieces of that coming through. And as this volume is transforming, so is this one. And so you basically have two volumes that are kind of doing this sort of motion, but the white volume is behind it. And so you get this really lovely rim lighting effect that for 1997 was like, holy crap. And then this texture of the wave coming in is its own volume with its own texture mapping. So just some interesting things going on there. Another really frustrating thing about this is that because the reference that we have here, we can't see because we have a gigantic enemy in the foreground. We can't really see the full shape of Leviathan here, because it's being blocked by the foreground. So we'll try to find a better reference than that. But yeah, I thought it was just, and we can see it from the background as well, that shape language, which we already have that in our thumbnail. So yeah, we're gonna come back into this mode. So you guys have seen this before. We're gonna be skipping a couple because I was just doing these as I saw fit. So the next one we're gonna be working on is Leviathan. And again, a lot of what I'm thinking about in the back of my mind is sort of situational awareness of like, okay, well, what is this thing going to look like, right? What is the intention here? What am I going to be using this for? And the intention here is that we're essentially designing a t-shirt. And so as such, we really want to be sure that we are honoring that in our design decisions, which is why we're not doing a big sphere and it's tsunami and all this other stuff. Like, I have a pretty strong idea of what I want to do. So let me just do one thing really quickly. Leviathan, Final Fantasy VII, original. I just want better reference photos. So I'm just going through the internet and grabbing, like, the Wikipedia article is great. Cool. So we've got that. And let's see. And it's fun too, because in the remake, Leviathan is this bluish purpley creature. And then, you know, obviously in different Final Fantasies, it's going to look differently. And even like the fan art or the key art, you see different colors. But the Leviathan that we're doing is OG Final Fantasy VII Leviathan. So it's going to have this like bluish, greenish color. Really want to honor a lot of that shape language. So I'm excited. I think this is going to be a really good time. So I'm done lecturing for now. And we're going to do what we've been doing for the past couple of weeks, which is we're going to be copying and pasting into a 2000 by 2300 DPI. That's not what I wanted to do. I don't know why I went to exporting. Yeah, of course it was unsuccessful. I think I just freaked out my computer or my iPad. Okay, let's do this again. Let's do it properly. Am I having a hernia? No. Okay. And then we're going to do the same thing again that we've been doing all the other ones, which is we're going to be making a grid size of 250. And the intention, I didn't know that you can move the grid. The intention here is that we could maintain sort of space. There's an intentionality about the amount of space that we are allowing for the edges of our composition. And I really want to keep sort of the main bits, I guess you would say, within sort of what we're going to call like the action safe of the frame. And we're going to take this down. And so since we have sort of the general thumbnail, right, like the general motion and gist of what this is going to look like, what we're going to go in and do now is we're going to actually take a look at our references and be like, what the hell am I looking at? And so there's a couple of things that I could look at here. There's concept art that is taking forever to load. And I believe this is from Yoshitaka. And I do also have the compendium that I don't want to... What? It's taking me forever to find what I want. Wow, this is like a lot of stuff. Okay. Enemies. Bosses. summons. It didn't even occur to me to look at this stuff. The concept art of the summon. Can you just... Okay. So the concept art has some pretty good information here. So its head shape... Look at his like little toothy grin. His head shape's a bit like this. And you know how much I love my S-curves. So we're going to do a couple of S-curves in there. And then this is sort of his throat situation. And then we've got his big ol' noodle boy body. And we want to try to keep the noodle the same noodle shape, right? We want to keep this width consistent. So there's a couple ways you could do that. If you're a more experienced designer or illustrator, hi, Fruit Nut, how are you? If you're a more experienced designer, you could eyeball it and be like, okay, I know that this is roughly about this. If you're not as experienced, this is also another reason why the grid really comes into play, is that here we have this square. And I know that this body at a diagonal is about half of the square. So you're kind of looking for landmarks, and you kind of do that. I call it the mental math of figure drawing in your head as a designer, and you don't really think about it. And so as a young designer, it's important to really know what you're looking for. And we're gonna make the danger noodle a little bit thicker here. And I think maybe what would be interesting is I'm having like 7 thoughts at the same time. Big brain, right? We're definitely trying to mental math it, use the big brains, use the big ear balls that you have, eyeballs, whatever. But yeah, no, it's really important that you're maintaining width consistency. Where you can start futzing with consistency technically is if you have sort of volumes that are on top of one another, and so it seems like there's a bigger distance or width. But for the most part, I would really just try to keep it the same danger noodle shape, thickness all the way across. And just looking at the reference, his tail does get really skinny towards the end. And then these are sort of the little spiny boys. And so I think just for clarity of illustration, I'm just showing you sort of what's going on in the back of my head. Again, this is like secret mental math that's going on. If I leave it sort of the way that I did it here, there's a couple of things that are already hurting my brain. One is that, and as a senior designer, you know, I'm going to point this out to people. This S-curve right here, and I love S-curves, it's extending into that line, right? So there's a couple of things here that you really want to be sensitive to. If this line is extending to here, well, that doesn't make any sense because this line is extending to here, right? So now we're creating sort of an unintentional MC Escher situation, and we don't want to do that. The other thing is I don't want it to start getting thicker in a place where it's hidden, and it creates a sort of illusion of like this person doesn't know what they're drawing, and there's a clarity of illustration that I think everybody has to keep in mind. So we're gonna kind of just correct this S-curve here and make sure that everything's lining up. And then we have a couple of S-curves here, so we want to be sure that that's lining up as well, right? And I think we're going to want to do this and have it start to thin out here for it to come out into sort of his like 4-pronged tail, like that. And I keep saying he, but like we don't know Leviathan's pronouns. It could be a she. They could be a they. But I'm gonna, for the purposes of this illustration, because it is a cool toned character, we're gonna call Leviathan a he. Now I'm questioning everything I know about my life. Is it a he? I don't know. Okay, so there's a couple of other things. So Leviathan, for the most part, is just a danger noodle throughout the entire body. But there's a couple of sets of fins and horns on them. So looking at my reference, there's a set of back fins and back spines that I really want to be sure is going to have clarity. So I'm going to use a different color for that because I'm still trying to noodle that out, right? And I think that those spines, well, let me erase this so that I know what's covering what. Like that. And then let me just clean this up because I don't want that to be here. Okay, we're gonna use this burnt ember color for this part. So looking at sort of his spines, we have these sort of like flippers on the side of his head, which are about here, I would say. And then he's got these back spines, which are about here. So we're just going to block that out. And then he's got sort of towards the termination of the tail where it starts to go from full noodle to smaller noodle. You have this sort of shark fin hoo-ha-ha moment going on here. And I feel like I could get away with... I feel like I can get away with terminating this spine here. The reason why that I feel that way is because it's obvious that this is part of the same ecosystem. This structure is very obviously one thing. It looks like, yeah, these are kind of C curves. It's obvious that this is just a continuing form. So there's a pretty good rule of thumb that if you're continuing a form behind another volume, you could have it terminate behind the other volume. For clarity's sake, your brain basically is going to fill in the lines, right? It's going to be like, oh, but yeah, like that pattern's going to continue. And if I see it begin to terminate in a certain way, so for example, even if I have that line there, your brain is going to think, okay, well, this pattern is going to continue. So then that means that there should be a spine here. Does that make sense? So like your brain is smart and it likes to do quiet, silent math. And that's where a lot of designers kind of forget, like your brain is going to make a lot of assumptions about your work. And so it's important that you like take the time to be like, okay, if I have this pattern here, are people going to understand what they're looking at? And are they going to, so that's where you get tangenting from. Are they going to make assumptions about my illustration that are not intentional? So we have that. Now the other thing that we have with him is, you know, his danger noodle whiskers, I guess you would say. And in the reference, he's got his danger noodle stuff just kind of flying everywhere. But when he does his little scream, he's like, the danger noodles kind of come out that way. So I'm thinking, let's create another layer because I'm a psychopath. We're going to make this one purple. I think we can turn off that layer because we're just trying to figure out sort of the like flow. So in the reference, the concept sketch, the concept art that I'm looking at, it's pretty far. Actually, I want it to be green. But I think in the actual summon video, I'm looking at it right now, it's actually quite short. I would say it's about that long. So we're going to go off of, I think we're going to have to go off of what we see there. The other thing that I need to consider is that he's got sort of his fins that come off the side of his body. And I think echoing that shape is just going to be visually appealing for everyone. So I think something like this. And then these are spines that come out like that. And then I think we're going to terminate, since we know that this is a reflected shape that's going in both directions, we can terminate that volume behind his head and not worry about it too much. So we're going to do that. Danger noodle. Danger noodle. All Cool. I think that's about where we're gonna leave it. And just kind of checking my work on my reference, looking at the video, the tsunami's coming. Let's see. In the game, all right, I feel like it'll behoove me to do this. In the game, you can kind of see it here. Because it's a game from 1997 and they were developing it from 1993 on. This is all kind of like a flat polygonal shape. Same thing with here. Same thing with this. So it's all pretty triangular. We do have a little bit of that shape language here, and I am missing the little boop on the top of his head. Boop. Something a bit like that. So his little ear bits are actually in a different spot. So now I need to make some decisions. I think moving this forward and rotating it is going to help. And then this back bit, because I want clarity. Oops. I'm going to bring it down. We're going to go back here and we're going to rotate that a little bit, right? Because I'm really just trying to, actually we're going to delete it. We're going to delete it. I just realized you guys can't see what I'm doing. Sorry about that. We're going to get rid of that tentacle on the side there, and we're going to just create a little bit more space for everything. I'm like almost wondering, yeah, that works. Maybe have that curl back. Yeah, I'm okay with that. Awesome. So now that we have this gigantic mess, we're gonna condense everything down, and we're gonna take the hue saturation down all the way, take the brightness down all the way. We're gonna clean that up just a little bit. Actually, take that back. We're gonna take the hue saturation down just a little bit, but I just want to have a better understanding of like where everything is. And we're just going to start building out our forms, right? So I know that Leviathan is basically just this gigantor monster noodle. And so I think the way that I want to handle that is I'm going to have this front part of his body here. So that's the front of the danger noodle. And then the back of the danger noodle is just going to be like a darker color. You'll notice I'm skipping the fins and the spines. Danger noodle of the sea. All right, now that we've done that, we're taking down the opacity of that top layer, and we're just going to clean this up with our wet pencil, because we live for the texture. And what I'm striving to do is maintain sort of the labor, right? We just did all this work to get all of this to make sense, the physics of it all, and to make sure that the size of everything is the right size. So honor the work that you've done, and now that you've done this thumbnail sketch and then a rough sketch, don't just like throw that away. Don't throw it idly away. Keep it, honor it, love it, cherish it. All right, now we're gonna move on to this layer and clean this up. Doing a little bit of erasing. We're doing a little bit of filling in. It's kind of just, I did that fill in, sort of the block shape, really dirty and quick, because I know I'm going to go back in and sort of check my math, right, and fix the work, because I really want this texture. And there's no efficient way to do this other than just drop huge blocks of color and then erase in to create the right shape. And when I have overlapping parts like this on like a danger noodle like this, I always want to be thinking about sort of what's a good place that I could hide the seams, so to speak. And that could be in the form of a shadow, or where are people just not going to be looking as intensely, so that I can sort of hide any mistakes. Okay, up here. You know what I would love to do, but I would need somebody to pay me to do it. Like, I would need to be funded for this. I would love to do a children's book explaining Final Fantasy VII. It would make me so happy. I would love that. I would love to make a children's book, like a little Golden Books version of Final Fantasy VII. I would be delighted. Okay, let me take a look. So he's got this sort of sharp snout situation. Right? So we're trying really hard not to belabor sort of these smaller details in the earlier stages of this illustration. Things like his head shape is fine, but like his mouth or his eyeballs, like things like that, we're not really concerned with that. We're just trying to block everything out. Why is it that every time I'm streaming, and it's like, the house is pretty comfortable, why am I sweating? Why am I sweating? Why am I sweating? I need answers. All right, now that the danger noodle, for the most part, has been blocked in, we are going to put in the fins. We're going to do the fins in blue because I can. And I think I'm just going to use my pencil for this because I won't mind having just a little bit. The other reason why I don't like filling, one, I'm lazy and I don't have time. Two is that I don't want to be sitting around filling this in because it's not going to give me a full, concise fill. But knowing what I'm going to be doing in a second, it's fine. It's not a problem. So we have our spines here. And that, and here, and there, like that. Okay. My little noodle boy. Okay, so this is going to be that back wing part of his head. And then the ones that are in front, we're going to do in front of the danger noodle. Oops, I forgot this back piece. So we're going to do that, it looks like. Hold on. I think something like that's going to be fine. I had an instructor that called this process of trying to like figure out like the math of something, but also make something look good. RoboCop versus Svetlana. And at the time, I thought that was the dumbest thing I'd ever heard of. Because I didn't get it at all. I was like, that's dumb. It wasn't dumb. It was actually a really good way to explain what this is like, what this thought process is like. Because you really, truly are trying to do a lot of mental math. You're figuring out the physics of something. You're really trying to observe an object. And you're also trying to make it look good. And that's a lot of labor. And you also you're like contending and fighting with yourself about what something looks like and what it shouldn't look like. And if you think about it in terms of like, okay, like, what was I working on? Okay, I get that. All right, what do I think is the problem here? Am I too worried about the aesthetics, and is that what's killing it? Or am I too worried about the perfectionism of it all, that I'm sucking the joy out of the motion in the illustration? Speaking of sucking the joy out of things, I really feel like these sorts of elements where there's like these little swoopy swoops, I find it's really delightful to just have them be hand done. Like, just do your best to follow your however you did it. And then you can kind of go back in and maybe thicken something up a little bit. And I see here that I have it kind of doing that, so I'm going to have it do that too. And these are not the final colors. We're just blocking everything in, making sure that everything makes sense. Okay, so we're going to do a couple of things here. We're going to do a mask on those layers, and we'll come back to that in a little bit. And we're going to turn this layer back on, and I'm going to do this in purple. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw circles. Hold on. I'm going to draw circles. And if you draw a circle and hold, and then you tap, it creates a perfect circle. And if you're doing bubbles, you kind of need the bubbles to be perfectly round. So this is a really good way to achieve that. And you'll notice I'm not really belaboring the size of the bubbles or anything, or like really overthinking it. This is kind of a Svetlana moment for sure. And I'm going to do some that are like that. And probably let's do 4. I think 4 is going to be good. 5 rather. Forgot that I had that little one. Now I want to have a little one over here and over here. Okay. All right. And then I think for this ground plane, just to have it, just to ground it a little bit. You don't have to. I mean, he does, after all, float, but I think having sort of a nod to the fact that his power is a tsunami is kind of fun. So I feel like we've blocked out all of the main bits. We could probably get rid of that background layer, and we can get rid of our drawing guide. And now we're just kind of looking at our comp and questioning everything we've ever done in our lives while we open a Diet Coke. Okay, next step is I want to block out his face just a little bit. And to me, I feel like what's going to make the most amount of sense, I'll do it in this pink color so that we could really see what's going on, is we're going to have this S-curve shape go into his cheekbone like that. The way that we're going to paint this is going to make sense in a little bit. And we'll also have it turn into his brow bone. And we'll have that happen on the same side here, just so that that's the same layer, like that. I think something a bit like this. And then I'm going to block in his little eyeball shape, which is kind of this diamond shape here, like that, right? So we have all of our main elements blocked in. So we can now turn off the sketch layer, and we're going to, not drawing assist, we're going to alpha lock everything. And you'll notice I haven't named everything, which is also what I'm going to do right now. You definitely want to be naming stuff as you go along, but I'm sometimes kind of lazy, and I'll reach a certain point where I'm like, I really need to start labeling stuff. And for me, I really want to do it before I start getting a whole bunch of color in, and really getting into like the weeds of wrapping up my illustration. So just taking a moment to rename stuff will benefit you, I think. And it's also just more professional. You're going to have to do it eventually anyways. Do it when you can. Fins back, and then we have rename whisker back. Especially if you're going to end up working in animation and you're like want to be a character builder or character designer. You have to have good naming conventions anyway, so it's important to have this skill and to think about sort of the person that's going to go into your file later. Face bones is what I'm going to call this. I'm going to call this one eyeball. I think this is going to be fins front. This is going to be whisker front. Okay. And we're going to grab this greenish color and pop that onto practically everything. I think his fins, yep, his fins are like this clear color that's not very helpful to look at. But in this reference that I'm looking at, it looks bluish. So I think we're going to make it this. Oh, you know what? I'm not even using my color palette that I usually use. That's the color palette I usually use down there. This palette above Ascend. That's the palette I usually use. That's why this felt so off. We're just going to leave it. If I change everything, I'm just going to give myself a headache. We're going to make this a soft sort of off-white blue. And we're going to do the same thing here. Beautiful. Whiskers. Whiskers got to be that green color. So, again, this is another reason why you do this. Everything's the same color. I have no idea what anything is. And if you're not paying attention, you're just going to kind of be like, what the F am I looking at? But it's not necessarily a bad idea to approach things this way as well, to have everything just be one flat color, is because now we're just looking at the silhouette. Does everything make sense? Even if we didn't do a pass of color on here, would this make sense? And here we actually can see the demonstration of what I was talking about earlier. Remember I was saying earlier, if you have an object passing behind another volume, or volume passing behind another volume, and it's transitioning in shape or behavior, the pattern is changing, your brain is trying to kind of fill in the blanks. And so here, this is such a great demonstration of it. Here you could see that it comes in, you can't see it, it comes in at this size and it leaves at this size. And your brain's kind of like, what? Because it's transitioning in volume, in width from there to there. There's a couple of different ways to solve it. I honestly think that you could solve this in values, but I think that it behooves you to just go in and fix that problem and have it transition either earlier or later, depending on what's more appropriate. So looking at little things like that, I think overall I'm pretty happy with it. So we're gonna start putting values into this baby. So I think that to add a darker value into this, to separate our values, we're going to be using this purple color and just see how we feel about it. We're going to clip mask into that back tail area. We're going to use a really soft watery brush that I have. And I'm just going to kind of buff it in like so. And I'll even kind of drag it under just a little bit. And then we're going to do the same thing to the front part of the body. Going to go to multiply. And so wherever I have sort of these little bits that are covering the front part, rather the front part of the body, but it's behind these like whiskers or the tails, I'm just going to kind of go in and give a little bit of a depth so that the darker value is going to pull away from the eye. The lighter value is going to push towards the eye. So your eyes and your brain are automatically doing the mental math of like, oh, this is an object that's moving away from me. Oh, this is an object that's moving closer to me. We're going to do the same thing to the whiskers. And rather than do a clipping mask, we're just going to pull a color up. And we'll do the same thing back here. I think that's going to look really lovely. And then this sort of face bone area, if I look at my reference, I'm pretty sure there's a bit of purple in there. So I'm going to clip mask into this, keeping that purple that I was using earlier, and pull it in, and then maybe darken it a little bit on that upper lid. And the reason for that is because light, when it hits your face, this is going to be lighter and this is going to be darker. So if you look at, say, The Lion King, I think is a really good demonstration of this. You'll see a lot of the lions, their sort of upper area is usually a darker orange or yellow, and then the lower area is a lighter one. It gives this illusion of depth and shadow. Excuse me. And then the eyeballs, because this is an object that is living on purple, and I know that the eyeball is this orangey yellow color. In order to have color harmony here, I'm going to put that color purple on here, and then I'm going to go in and I'm going to invert this color information. If I remember how to do that. Can I not do that in Procreate? I can't. That's fine. What we're going to do is we're going to go all the way over for hue. And just kind of find a good yellow that fits kind of within that family. If this was Photoshop, this would do it instantly. And then I think, I'm trying to think what I want my next steps to be. I think for the spines and all of the fins and whatnot, we're going to use this darker color. And for the fins that are farther away from us, I'll probably do it a lot lighter. But the fins that are closer to us, we'll do it a little bit thicker. So this is where you start talking about like line weight and how you make decisions that way. And the reason why these fins, these spines are on a different layer is we're going to be doing a treatment to those fin layers that is going to necessitate the spines to be on a different layer. So that's going to make sense in a second. Okay. Great. And then if I remember correctly, there's supposed to be a couple of spines on his back somewhere. Yeah, so there's supposed to be these little guys here. So we'll just kind of, actually what we'll do, we'll put that on this back spine area. Take it off of alpha look. And do that. Cool, cool, cool. And then our background color. Let me take a look at what our reference is. It's like this really dark teal. Like that. I think that's lovely. And then I'll make the rest of it pop and pull forward. All right, so a couple of things. We're going to be doing the treatment to the fins. So for fins, I like to experiment. Sometimes I'll use color dodge, see how that feels. We're gonna also try, I feel like color dodge is fine. Remember that mask that we made earlier? We're gonna modify it now. So we're gonna kind of buff in there's kind of two ways that I like to approach this. I'll either start with the connection point at the body, or I'll start at the end point where the fins are and move in and just see how both feel. Kind of buff that out with my texture brush just a little bit. I think that's it for these, right? It's just those 3 fins. And then you can even take it down in opacity just a little bit. And then we'll do the same thing to these back fins. So we'll kind of pull that down just a little bit. And then give it a little bit of texture. And then we'll pull the opacity down just a little bit, like that. And then to bring sort of a little bit of delight into it, we're going to do the same thing with the bubbles. So I think for bubbles, we'll probably do like a soft light, take it down a little bit, see how different colors are going to work, maybe like a purpley color or a pink color. You can try an overlay. I feel like that's going to be too dark. What if we do a color dodge with this pink? That's kind of fun. And then we'll add some of the green in, right? Because bubbles are like a variety of colors. And then we'll pull some of this yellow. I don't think the yellow is going to show up because it's on blue. I think that's quite handsome. And then we're going to go on top of it with like a screen. And we'll give each center of each bubble sort of a soft pass with a soft brush. And it doesn't have to be super precise. It doesn't have to be really labored. You just want to do it enough so that there's something there. And then we're going to mask that as well. And we're going to invert the mask. So you could also do this in reverse, but I find that this is a much easier process in the order that I did it based off of what I was trying to accomplish. So these are sort of the highlights of the bubble. So it's like all of this texture without all of the labor, which I think is really nice. Next, we're going to go in with the color dodge. And I think we're going to grab this pinkish color that we have here. And we're going to start highlighting sort of the upper band of the body, those eyebrow volumes, the top of the nose, maybe this lower part, that cheekbone that we had earlier, the top of this whisker, right? Because we're trying to pull it forward, trying to give a little bit of information there, give context, kind of do a little bit on the top of the spines if we really wanted to. Even do like a little bit of smattering of texture. I mean, it is a danger noodle, an ocean danger noodle. And maybe where we don't have a hard light, we just have highlights of the texture. just to give a little bit of context, and go over the bubbles again. So there's a whole bunch of different ways you could approach bubbles. I find that this is sort of the fun part of like the discovery of like, ooh, if I layer this on top of that, it's going to give me a really delightful color. Definitely along the spines here. Okay, so I have a pretty strong feeling I know what the issue is, and that's that we don't have enough contrast. We have a lot of contrast in the foreground and the background, but we don't have enough contrast within our model. Oops. Right? So the Danger Noodle stands out a hell of a lot against that background. And thankfully the bubbles are not super distracting from the rest of the composition. And the Danger Noodle is not quite as colorful and light and effervescent as I would like for it to be. And I think the easiest solve for that is to go into these areas where I had that multiply, and I just pull it down a little bit on that purple, which again is why we're working in layers, right? Because we want to manage and navigate these things in a way that is not super invasive to the integrity of the whole drawing, and you have malleability in it. And I think the other thing that's going to really help, I'm going to go back in with that purple, and since we had to darken it there, we'll darken it here, and we're going to make this multiply, and we're going to do the reverse of what we just did. No, because it's going to blend into the background. I wonder how doing this is going to look. Hold on. Yeah, that actually is quite handsome. I'm not mad at that. So I think what I'm going to do is use texture and repetition to start breaking up these forms just a little bit, with the implication, right, that your brain is going to be like, oh, the pattern is continuing behind this volume. And that's going to also help to continue I forgot what I was going to say. It's going to help to continue something. The understanding of the illustration with the way that you use pattern and repetition. And I'm kind of using the side of my brush to kind of have like a lower opacity impact. And everybody's toolkit's different. Like if you have a different approach, then I think that that's totally valid. But ultimately, the way that our eyes work is the same. The way that the human body understands information that comes into it is the same. It's pretty universal. So if you find something that works better for you, or if you have a system that works better, then like absolutely use it and do that. But this is the system that I found best helps me. And I think we're going to have just sort of a nice sharp that. Even here a little bit more. Danger Noodle. Danger Noodle of the sea. He's a danger noodle. Okay, and then the spines layer, we're going to alpha lock that. And I think we're going to want the spines to get hotter. I think that that's going to really help as well. And I think the spines that are sort of in this background I don't want to draw attention to it, right? Because if we add too much light to those background elements, they're going to want to pull forward. But these front fins, I definitely want it to have that effect. And I think even this front whisker could afford to have just a little bit of just a little bit of heat, a little bit more warmth, just to pull it forward a little bit more. We could probably afford to do that a little bit in the body as well. Just kind of buff it in. And like even use my texture brush to kind of break that up a little bit. Like I feel like that's fine. All right, so we're kind of in a good enough moving on stage for that. What we're gonna do is we're gonna do this sort of technique I keep seeing done all over TikTok, which is like the water technique. We're gonna experiment. I've seen people do it, but I haven't tried it yet. So basically, and I'm gonna turn off the bubbles. Basically what people are doing to achieve the bubble, the pool effect, is they create a bunch of beans, whole bunch of beans, lots and lots of beans. The beans. Okay. Excuse me. And then, if I remember correctly, they were kind of doing this to fill in the rest of the space. This will make sense, hopefully. If not, then you guys get to watch me try to learn a new technique and everybody wins. Okay. So you do that. And then you connect sort of the space between these shapes that you've just created, which is so much labor. And I already know how I want to do this in reverse, just so that I am doing less of this. But like now I feel like I've committed to this like technique that I saw on TikTok. And I think also this is how you would do it if you were a traditional artist. Like if you were working with paint or something, you couldn't do this with like a marker. You would have to do this by hand like this. Wait, the technique that I'm thinking of, you would not be able to do that with a marker. This is like great if you have a marker or something and you're trying to draw like a pool texture or water texture. This is probably how you would do it. For me, this is a lot of labor, and then I have to go in and like clean everything up, and I can't be bothered. So as a digital artist, what I think I would rather do is this. I would rather fill it in. Actually, don't mind that the texture's kind of not that crazy. And then we're going to do the reverse of it. We're going to create a whole bunch of... We're going to erase into it, which for me makes a lot more sense. I'm doing all this labor in areas that I know are going to get erased. So we're going to do a bunch of lima beans and S shapes because I love S shapes. And we're going to do some circles because that's fine too. Do some more lima beans. And I don't know about you, but this does feel pool-like, water-like. Okay, lima bean. Lima bean. These are actually not lima beans. Don't come for me. These are this is a lima bean. I love how like there's like these really complex things I could draw, but when it comes to drawing a fucking lima bean, I'm like, I don't know what I mean. Embarrassing. That's gonna be a circle. Sort of like this figure 8 shape. We're going to do like an S sort of shape over here. Here we're going to do sort of like a heart shape. And maybe just kind of have the circles that I'm doing, I kind of want to have be like this though. Like parallel to the ground, so to speak. This is kind of like a butterfly shape. All right. And then this sort of texture, we're gonna do that. I'm kind of guessing what's behind the Leviathan back there. Okay. Okay. This is still so much labor. So much labor. I can tell I'm like a jaded industry person because I'm just like, that is too much work for anyone. Okay. Good enough. All right. We've created this texture. I'm gonna drink some water. All right. And because I'm paranoid, we're going to double that. We're going to duplicate it. We're going to turn this off. Because if I mess up, I don't want to deal with the repercussions. We're going to clip into this. And then we're going to duplicate it again. And clip into it. Actually, I lied. We're gonna warp this first. Nope. Sorry. I'm figuring it out as I go. Forgive me. I happen to be talking out loud while I do it. This top layer, we're gonna bring up the brightness. Actually, we're not. I'm having issues today. The bottom one, we're gonna bring down the brightness and bring up the saturation, which you can't see, but that's fine. Then we're gonna go to warp, and we're gonna warp this just a bit. I'm gonna go to multiply. Yeah, you see? You see what we're doing? Good, because I don't. And then we're going to do the same thing to this upper layer. So we're going to go to warp and experiment with sort of some of the placement here. Like that. I think that's fine. And then sort of freeform and bring it. Nope, that's fine. And then this will be a color dodge. And then on this one, we'll take it down just a little bit. I think what I want this one to be is this bluish color. And rub that in just a little bit. All right, now we're going to turn our bubble layers on all that bullshit back on. I think that's everything. Okay, and then the one last thing that I want to do, because it'll make me happy, is I have a texture brush that I call Sailor Spoon. And I'm going to put it below this ground layer. And I think we're going to use that purpley color and just see how this goes. We'll go to color dodge. And it's literally bubbles that I created. It's literally like a bubble brush that I've created. It's called Sailor Spoon. It's on Gumroad. And I think I also want to have just a little bit of color variation because it's just kind of irritating the bejesus out of me. And we're going to invert that. I just remembered how to do invert. We're going to have to go back. We're going to go to multiply and then just kind of buff that down just a little bit. Just to have a little bit of like, you know, like hue, color variation in that background. And now that which I'm going to duplicate. I actually want it to be just a little bit stronger. We're going to fill it with this purple color. We're going to fill it with the purple color. Okay. We're going to invert it. And it's going to give us a contrasting color to the purple that we have there, which is like this greenish color. And then from there, I usually manipulate it to sort of the hue that I want. And then we're going to bump up the saturation. Right? So the value is the difference. That's going to make it pull forward just a little bit more. And I think that with that, I definitely want this shape to be darker around where the eye is so that it really pops. You see that? And even with this eyeball, I think taking a little bit of this pink and really gently like coming in just to give it a little bit more shape, I think would be really lovely. I think the last thing that I want, and this is just for me because it's like a serpenty, watery, danger noodly kind of character. Two things. One is that I want a lot more yellow and pink and purple in this just because I think it's going to really benefit it. And it doesn't have to be super crazy. You don't have to go super wild. I'm going to take a little bit of this pink and kind of introduce it into some of the scales, especially sort of these hot areas, some of the colder areas. I think even like adjacent to wherever we have a lot of contrast, wherever you have these highlights, you can sort of bring that pink in. And again, it's a little bit, I'm even using the side of my pencil for some of them because I don't want to overwhelm my drawing and have a whole bunch of it. But I do want to have enough so that it feels like the scales of a serpent. We're going to do the same thing with the yellow. But with the yellow, we're going to maybe bring it up just a little bit and bring it into the scales. And then just put it in the highlights. Like that. Again, it's not like we're not going crazy. Maybe have a little bit here. It's super, super, super subtle. From a distance, you don't really notice it, but it gives a little bit of vibrance to your illustration that I think really helps. Lastly, and this is one of my favorite parts, we're going to use this yellowy color and see how it goes. And if we hate it, we'll swap the color out. And I think it's going to be too hot with the yellow. This is one of my favorite brushes. We use this a lot when I was working on movie posters. Under Luminance tool, you have the light pen. And just a little bit in the areas that kind of need it. Yeah, so I think that doing the yellow here is going to be too much. But I think using the green just helps it. And you don't even have to, like, you don't have to go to color dodge and like make a whole thing of it. Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be a blending layer or blending mode. But I think that it'll help with characters like this. It'll really help them sparkle. And obviously, like, not every character is going to need this. Like Titan, for example, certainly didn't need this treatment. But I think that if you have a character that is sparkly or magical, going in with a little bit of love to add some sparkle to it that's super subtle doesn't hurt. And then I think for these areas, like the bubbles, having just a little pop like that is nice. We don't need to have it everywhere, but we do want it to be a little evocative of sort of that effect that we had right in the summon. And like, consider it. If you start doing it and you're like, wow, I actually kind of really hate that. Okay, so then get rid of it. Like, it's not going to work for everything. You're not going to love it everywhere, but wherever it feels appropriate to you, try it. Sometimes that, like, I'll have people come back and be like, why doesn't this feel like complete or done. And I'm like, I don't know, get on my face. And then I do something like this that's really subtle, and taking like that 10-20 minutes to just make it feel just a little magical sometimes really helps you. Right, so now I'm kind of getting a little crazy, but I actually kind of like it. I think that looks really beautiful. What do I put on the edges of all the spines? Is that interesting? I wonder. Yeah. We don't hate it. We don't have to do it to all the spines. We'll just do it to the ones that are in the foreground. Kind of going to go back. And I'm also, you'll notice, doing highlights in a way that faces Leviathan. And also sort of that top band as well. A bit like that. So maybe the primary light source is coming from up top. But he's also giving off a little bit of light, which is kind of fun. So down here, maybe it's not as noticeable. Oops. Grab this greenish color. Yeah, that really, like, that feels good, I think. There we go. I'm tired. And like, I actually finished in an hour and a half. I feel like sometimes these lectures I'm like drawing and I'm just like taking forever. So I'm happy that I didn't take a bazillion years to do this illustration. So yeah, I hope that this was fun. I'm tired. And yeah, I hope you guys are taking care of yourselves. I hope you're happy and I hope you're healthy, and I will see you next time. Bye. Absolutely, we're gonna go out using the Party Parrot filter yet again.